And I'll talk about how to do that right now because we're going to segue into Rousseau. And you need to know how to access the library website in order to read the excerpts from the social contract that are outlined in the syllabus for today. So we're moving on to Rousseau's The Social Contract. So I'll scroll down a little bit here. So in order to get to the reading, The Social Contract by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, there's 3 ways you can go about getting there. The first is to go to the Fullerton College Library website, which is library.fullcall.edu, or you can just go straight there, library.fullcall.edu. Or you can go to the Fullerton College main webpage and click on the book icon in the upper left-hand corner. Or if you're on Canvas, you can click on Fullerton College Library from the main tab on Canvas. If you're on a laptop, it's on the left-hand side, sorry, it's backwards. Might be in a different spot on your phone. Coleslaw, hey, shh. So those are the 3 ways to get there. Then once you get there, you'll see something called the one search box in the right middle of the page, okay? In the one search box, you'll type in Rousseau, The Social Contract. Then that'll lead you to the Fullerton College keyword search page, in which the first entry should be the social contract and the first and second discourses. At the top, you'll see a little yellow prompt that reads, "Hello guest, login for full access." Click on that. You need your ID and your last name to log in, okay? Once you're logged in, click on the first entry. The first entry, number 1, again, should be the social contract and the first and second discourses. To the left, you're going to see an icon that says PDF full text. Click on that icon. Then click on contents to the left. The social contract, as you see it in the contents, begins on page 149. I believe chapter 1 begins on page 156, but don't quote me on that just yet. There's a little box at the bottom middle of the page. You'll write that number in there, okay? Then you'll click on the arrow on the right until you arrive at book 1, chapter 1. Read chapter 1, 4, 5, and 6 of the social contract, of book 1 of the social contract. And again, as you're reading, make sure to highlight, annotate, and box or define unfamiliar words as you read, okay? I'm going to highlight all of this in yellow, but I'm also going to show you exactly what I just did so that, 1, you can like take a photo of this, and you can, when you go to look for any other outside sources, you can follow this same model. You just, instead of putting Rousseau, The Social Contract, you put, Goffman, the stage, whatever that Goffman reading is, I forget right now, right? Or Schultz Solidarity, right? Like you can put in any of those. So let's go to the library website, and I'll show you how to access exactly what I just did. Okay. All right. So I go to the Fullerton College website, fullcall.edu. That takes me to the home page. You see here the book icon that I mentioned in those instructions. One of the ways you can access the library, click on that book. Takes you right to the library homepage. One search, that white box I was telling you about, is right here. So the social contract, okay? Doing exactly everything I just told you. I just outlined, but I'm showing you how to do it, okay? So you see, number 1 is the social contract and the first and second discourses. But see up here for these last 2 pages, it said, "Hello guest, log in for full access." You'll want to do that sooner rather than later because it'll make you do it eventually, right? Okay. So you put in your ID number and your last name. What? So you put in your ID number and your last name, and then it'll take you, sure, why not? It'll take you to the information page. Now I want to pause here really quickly before I go to the next step, because I want to show you some things that these pages have and that they do, okay? First off, you have the title, you have the series in which it's found, like if it's found in an anthology, you have the author, you have the place of publication, the press, and the date. That's all the information you would need to cite this on your own and works cited. But you also have this cite button right here. So you can click on this cite button and it'll give you all the different ways that you can cite information. What you want to do, since this is a humanities level course, you don't want to do APA or MLA. You want to scroll down to, I'm sorry, you don't want to do APA or Chicago. You want to scroll down to MLA, copy, you know, if you put this in a works cited, you have it right here, highlight it, copy it, and then paste it onto your works cited page. And don't forget that hanging indent here, this thing that looks like a stair step. Don't forget to do that in your own works cited page. So that's where you can cite it. You can also email it to yourself. You can save it. You can have the permalink here. All you need, again, is your login information when you go back to it. But all of this is here for you. You can add it to your Google Drive because a lot of you have that. And then you have a description. Sometimes you'll see this as abstract right here if it's a journal article. This is usually like a 200 to 500 word summary of the text that you're reading. So it gives you an overview of what the person talks about in the text, right? So that's the overview of, that's the publishing information overview, the citing information, the saving information, the overview of what the text is about. But then you need to read the text. So here you see it says PDF full text, which means they have the full book online for you to click on and go to. And because this is in an anthology, it's going to have more than just the social contract in there. So I'm not a total masochist. I don't want you to read this whole thing, right? Because it's hundreds of pages. What I want you to do is go exactly to the places, the excerpts that you need to read for class today. So go to contents. It's like a table of contents, and then look through it, right? We are going to the social contract. So as you see here, that's on page 149. So let me pull this up a little bit because, oh, geez, oh, pizzo. Okay, because what you'll see at the bottom of this page is a page finder. So you put in 149 here, right? Just put that in here. And it'll take you to the beginning of the social contract in this ebook. Go forward a few pages because you know, you can, if you want to read the prefatory note, great. But then it'll take you to the various books of the social contract. There's chapter 1. So chapter 1 is on page 156, right? You'll read chapters 1, 4, 5, and 6. So these are the steps to show you how to access not just ebooks, but you could access anything. If we go all the way back to the Fullerton College Library and you click on databases, this will help you to access any online scholarly journals, statistical databases on Statista, opposing viewpoints, academic search complete, and follow all you do is follow those same steps with whatever text you're looking for, right? And that'll help you perform research online. So I hope that helps in terms of, you know, dipping your toes in the water of research, particularly for essay 1. But now I want to go to the rest of the notes on the social contract, okay? So the social contract, again, is something that was written a few hundred years ago, not as old as quintillion, but still pretty old. So, and it's translated from the French. So it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to read. However, you can do it. And I've put some guiding ideas or some guiding questions here for you, or some quotes for you to think about, right? Chapter 1, we're talking broadly. Rousseau has things to say about the social order, about freedom, and about what he considers quote unquote natural. And the opposite of natural are conventions, right? To Rousseau. Conventions are things that are created, right, by man's mind, essentially, right? Like rules. So that's not natural, according to Rousseau. Chapter 1's very brief. It's just kind of setting the stage, right? Chapter 4, let me tab this in there. There we go. 2 questions about chapter 4. What does Rousseau have to say about slavery and subjecthood to a ruler? In other words, being the subject to a ruler as they relate to this notion of alienation that he talks about. And what does he have to say about war? Is it natural or is it not, and why? And kind of who benefits in war, who doesn't benefit in war, who's got to fight wars versus why they're fought. Start thinking about what Rousseau has to say about these things. In chapter 5, really, I want you to kind of think about what he means when he says, it would be well to examine the act by which a people becomes a people, for this act being necessarily anterior to the other, and the other being people being ruled by a ruler, right, is the real foundation of society, right? In other words, what makes us go from being these individuals to being these groups of people that, you know, want to form a society, want to form a civil society? Like, where in this implied social contract, you know, how does that come about? So thinking about that, right? And then chapter 6, the social pact, which is kind of like the premise of the social contract, right? The social pact, and in this one he says, in short, each giving himself to all gives himself to no one. And since there is no associate over whom we do not acquire the same rights which we concede to him over ourselves, we gain the equivalent of all that we lose and more power to preserve what we have. Okay, so basically, if I choose to be part of a civil society, of a, let's say, a democracy, right, and I choose to live in a society that has some form of governance and some sort of shared set of rules and behaviors with other people, with all the other people I live in this society with. Rousseau says, well, am I not giving up myself to be a part of this? And then he answers that with kind of this quote, right, which is, if we're all doing this, if we're all sort of giving ourselves to this society, then there shouldn't be an imbalance, right? Because if we're all doing it and we're all, you know, kind of working for the betterment of society, then clearly we're also working equally for the betterment of ourselves and one another, right? So that's kind of what we're looking at in terms of the social pact. It's not on the syllabus, but I recommend you also reading chapter 7, The Sovereign, because that's going to help in terms of thinking about the video by Kimberly Jones that is part of your discussion board response. So it's not a bad idea to read that. Again, I know Rousseau is challenging, but he's not impossible. And you don't have to be a Rousseau expert, right? There are people with PhDs who can do that. You just have to grapple with this reading. So I'm going to take it off stop share now. I hope that helped in terms of helping you to navigate these readings, helping you to navigate how to perform research. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. And I hope you have a great rest of your week. Good luck on those essays, and I will see you around. Bye.